So, hey, welcome to the Stump Podcast, where I talk about forestry careers, really anything else on my mind. And tonight we've got a really fun collaboration. We have Blake Manley with Manley Jobs and Brian Rupp with Rupp's Timber Tutorials. We're going to do a fun little three-way collaboration, and I'm guessing that this is going to end up on Blake and Brian's channels at some point as well. And I'm not really sure where we're going to go. We're just going to have kind of a fun time chatting about what everybody's up to, and go from there. And maybe Blake, I'll kick it over to you first, because you're kind of the one that just launched out big time and just like dove in and started I think a business around all this kind of stuff, and really running with things.
Yeah, trying, Matt. Appreciate that. Hey, this is fun, because I respect the heck out of you two and what you're trying to do for the timber industry. Brian's, we talked about what he was going to do a couple years ago, and then he jumped off. And now, last time I looked, Brian, you had like 21,000 followers on your Instagram, which is phenomenal. So great. Matt, you and I talked about some of this, a year ago or so, and I've been on your show a couple times now. And, we're just really working hard. I think the three of us, and that's not leaving anybody out that is working hard. There's others, obviously, but we're working really hard to just get the positive message out there that forest products is okay. And that there's careers in it, there's jobs in it, it's renewable, all those things. And that's pretty exciting. So recently, what I did, I kind of jumped off the ship of reasonable thought, and decided to turn Manley Jobs into my business. And so for the last 7 months, I've been doing that as my primary source of income, dedicating myself to education, but through forestry. And not that I wasn't before, but this is kind of, my ship now. Started the podcast, the Manley Jobs podcast, and we're sitting at almost 700 listens, I guess, downloads and listens over the course of 5 weeks, which is pretty exciting. And there's more to come there. Trying to do 2 episodes a week, but that's challenging when you start logging again, and you're waking up and you're in the woods at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're home at 3:30 ish, but you're dead tired by the time you get home. So, yep, new endeavors. Brian, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Blake. Some of Blake and I, we've done some podcasts together, and yeah, I still, when people say, "Oh, you got 20 some thousand followers on Instagram," it's like, yeah, I don't really know what it means, but it's whatever. I'll run with it. I'll keep going with it. And it has been fun, but I think it's more work than what people realize. It's like, you have your real job, your regular job, and you can get burnt out mentally. You can just, and you come home and you just want to relax. And I got 4 kids, and they want a piece of dad's time as well. It's like, okay, when am I gonna have time to, continue to work on what I'm doing? But, I just, like you said, Blake, I just want to just have a positive message about forestry and what we do. I mean, I've often thought about this. If we have 100 eyes in forestry, 81 of them have been blackened over the years because we've just been demeaned about what we do, and there's just always been a negative message out there. So that's always been one of my underlying goals, is to just try to change the message of who we are, what it is that we do, and that we're actually trying to do some good out there. Yeah, logging can be ugly. Guess what? A marriage can be ugly too. A building site can be ugly, but you know what? You work at those things, you work at a clear cut, you replant it, you work on a building site, you work on a marriage, and guess what? It becomes a beautiful thing once again. And so it's just, just the positive message, the things we're trying to drive home, and we do it 1 episode, 1 post, 1 phone call at a time. And you'd like to be like, other people that just seem to have their social media growth go like this rather than like this. but I'm not Mr. Beast or Joe Rogan or anything like that. But I've had friends that, people that have reached out to me on Facebook Messenger say they'll listen to a podcast and be like, that's cool. I never knew that. And I'm
Yes.
sitting there thinking, it's like, I kind of thought that was just general knowledge, what I explained. And they're like, yeah, I never knew that. This is awesome. This is cool. So one person at a time, one post at a time, one episode, one podcast at a time, I guess. So
Matt, I think that's part of the problem is we assume what the general public understands far too often. I'm in the education space, so I guess I got to see it for 5 years in a classroom of what kids didn't know. And granted, maybe their parents are loggers and they still didn't know it because they don't pay attention to mom and dad, right? But the general public just doesn't know enough. You're in those conversations a lot. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's something that I really actually have been kind of surprised ever since I was not. Well, it's been an interesting day. That tired at the end of the day part you're just talking about, Blake. Yeah. I wasn't really planning to get into forestry, being a city kid growing up. And I was really shocked when I really started getting into forestry, declared my major at the University of Washington, started finding out how many people didn't even realize that the state of Washington had a mandatory replanting reforestation law, that had been on the books at that point for what, 20 years, or so.
The 70s, right? Since the 70s?
Yeah,
You,
1974, when the state forest practice regulations came in, and to me that was really shocking. Was one, not that they didn't know that there was a reforestation law, but then when you start to talk to these people, and I'm like, well, they're like, oh, there's this horrible clear cut. There were no trees or anything. I said, well, did you stop? No. How fast were you going? Oh, about 45 miles an hour. So, well, next time you stop, get out. Next time you're there, stop, get out, walk into that clear cut and look around, because I'm guessing that there's little trees out there. You just can't see them. And, and that's just been a constant narrative to me that I constantly run across, is just really, the general public, you're right, just really doesn't understand what we do. And I think that part of that is, what's the typical characteristics of somebody in the industry? Hardworking, usually pretty dedicated to family one way or another. And, they don't necessarily, they're not out in that education field, regular public, they're living their lives. And then when we run into people, it's like we need to tell our story. Plus, I think, like Brian pointed out, we've been, as an industry, beat up for so long. How many people really want to get out and say, hey, I'm a logger or I'm a forester? Because there's always that little bit of a stigma, I guess, that comes along with it.
I was advised not to do what I do today by people in the industry. Now, I'm not saying some big execs, but people in the industry were like, sometimes when it's quieter, our industry is able to do more things. Once it gets loud, there's more protesting and everything, and making it aware to people. And I just disagree. I think we need to be more loud than the other side in a positive way. We don't need to be in a negative way, but in a positive way. Brian, one of the things that I was blown away by with what you're doing is you are literally just going out doing your job every day, and you just take your stupid phone out and you take a 20-second clip of, hey guys, bet you didn't know this.
no, yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, that was the goal. It's like, here's what's going on. Here's why we're cutting this. Here's what I think about this. And, here's what it looks like after we've logged and we've thinned a stand. Now look at it, oftentimes I've pointed out, if a lightning struck that tree right there, it's really not going to go anywhere because we've got great tree spacing. Oh, and by the way, there's young seedlings coming up, and And then I also like to stop at those, a clear cut or a spot that's been, was 5 or 10 years previous, and you can see all the trees that are grown up. It's just, yeah, I think more, you're always thinking, I got time to sit there and think as I drive, out to the woods, and it's like, well, I could do this or I could do that. And some things I do and other things I'm like, well, maybe I overthink and I think, okay, well, how is the public or my friends or people going to perceive me? And I think I just need to get over that and just say, you know what, damn the torpedoes. I'm going for it. Just I really don't care what they say or what they think or what they comment. Um, but for the most part, and I think you guys will find the same that most of your comments that you find on social media are positive. There's always the naysayers out there, but I don't know, they're probably less than 10%. They're probably less than 5%. I'm not going to do the math, and I'm not going to look at that. I've got other things to do. But yeah, just I always got my phone on me, and I got my drone too. And I got lots of drone footage I can put out there. But once again, it's like you put a YouTube video together, it can take you 2, 3 hours to edit that thing. And it's like, man, I've been up at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night trying to edit and put something together, and you do that too often, and well, it starts to catch up with you. But how dedicated are we?
Well, Brian, I will tell you, you are not alone. I do the same thing with overthinking, sometimes being in too much of a rush. Oh man, I should have pulled over and did this little 30-second spiel. What are people going to think? It took me a year of talking about this podcast before I launched it. But, in many ways, Brian, I actually think a lot of what you do, and some of the quote experts unquote that I've talked to around with social media and public outreach, that kind of stuff, those little shorts actually probably, and that's why you've got 21,000 followers, in today's world with the short attention spans. That's the type of stuff that people will, that the algorithms will grab and push out there because they capture an interesting topic, and but it's in a bite size, easy to digest size. And I think you're doing great work, and so I just encourage, keep it up. And there's an author, all of a sudden his name escapes me, but he had a phrase that I really liked of haters math. 100 positive comments plus one negative comment equals one negative comment.
Yeah.
And so I've just kind of tried myself to just be like, and this is really hard because my daughter's been pushing me lately, you got to engage and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but do I really want to read through all the comments? Because I know that if I see that 1 out of 100 that's, oh, you're an idiot or whatever, it's like, is that, I guess to me, it's my certain amount of lack of confidence, I guess, in what I'm doing. So you're not alone. I'm right there with you.
So I posted my first video, I think it was August 15th of 2023. And then it started growing pretty good. It was just kind of steady. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I posted one October. It was middle of October, and I was posting a video about a line machine, and this was just basic stuff. This was just like I wasn't didn't I've never ever come across like I'm an expert. Like you'll never ever hear me say I know everything there is to know. I still try to consider myself a humble individual. I'm willing to learn, and there's other people out there that can teach me some stuff. But I posted this video about a line machine, and this guy, he's from over in the west side, and he's a logger. And he got on there and he commented. He's like, every time you comment, you just sound effing stupider and stupider. And there was about 4 or 5 F words in the comment. And so I kind of looked him up on I looked him up, Facebook stalked him, and so I figured out where he was from. It's like I used to live over on the west side, and so he was from that area, and I was just, and it stunned me for like 3 days. I just didn't post anything. I was like, man, and I thought about it and thought about it. It's like, I'm not. I don't do what I do on social media I'm not doing it for the loggers and for the I mean in a way, but I want my stuff to reach somebody who knows nothing about logging and nothing about forestry. That's my target audience. I appreciate, the loggers and foresters out there that do follow me and do comment and give it a thumbs up or give it a heart, man. I really appreciate that, but that's why, when I'm explaining stuff and I might get it wrong, I might call it a hook tender, a choker setter, and there's different terms. When you're over on the west side of Washington, a chaser isn't the same as it is over here in Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, and Idaho. And a rigging, man, is for some reason when you crossed over the Cascades, the terminology got screwed up. And so there's always this fight between the west side loggers and the Inland Empire loggers on this terminology, and I don't care. I'm here in Idaho in this neck of the woods. I'm just going to call it what I'm going to call it. And so, if there's loggers on the west side that want to beat me up over it, fine. That whatever. That's okay.
Hey, but Brian, everyone knows what you're talking about when you talk about a hooker. So maybe just call them all hookers, right?
Right.
Okay, for our listeners that may not know logging terminology, a hooker is the guy or gal that actually hooks the chokers up to the skyline as it goes out off the mountain, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually like I was talking to a guy the other day that says I'm looking to hire a bunch of hookers. And for us in the industry, we didn't care. Like, it was like, oh, hey, yeah, we'll look for some guys for you, some people to work for you. If you say that in the wrong audience, that's probably not appreciated.
Yeah, go down to Vegas and say I'm looking to hire a bunch of hookers, and you might be in an interrogation for 3 hours with a naked light bulb above your head and 3 FBI agents looking at you from the other side of the room. So
hey, that's part of that what all three of us are trying to do. It's education, right? We're trying to educate in some capacity, and in those terms, whether it's the same across the board. Okay. I was doing a podcast for somebody else the other day, and we were talking about the differences in forestry across the whole United States, and how, depending on where you are, different products are made, different people are sought after, different industry, that they run things differently. I was in Indiana last fall for the national FFA contest, and I was talking to one of the foresters there, and he was talking about all the prices that they were doing were in board feet, not in 1,000 board feet, because they're dealing in walnut, they're dealing in maple, they're dealing in all these high price stuff. He's like, yeah, we're getting 2.25 a board foot for our maple right now. And I was like, wow, and so I had to do the math. I was like, oh God, that's $225,000, whatever, right? But it was just a different way of talking. Same industry, talking a little different, Matt. And I know, hey, you deal with that a lot in your neck of the woods as terminology and understanding and all that, because you're in the public eye a lot more than we are.
Yeah, I guess what was really kind of bouncing through my mind, Brian, when you were there talking is, wow, what a missed opportunity that person had of, rather than beating you up for doing something that in the end is ultimately going to help that individual's business, their family, the people they employ, and an opportunity to, point out, hey, maybe over here something's called this, or, hey, this is the reality, that we deal with. Because in many ways, I guess I still struggle that, Axemen, in many ways was a great show, but in many ways it just made the industry look like it was full of a bunch of buffoons and goofballs and idiots. And which is always really funny because I know some of those guys and they're the farthest thing in the real world from what they were on TV.
Right.
Not to mention the fact of, being a forest engineer and screaming at the TV about, well, of course you pulled over that tail tree because you took all the guy lines off of it in between takes. Well, of course you're going to yank it over, you dumb. But yeah, I mean, I think, the terminology part, to me, I don't know, in what I deal with on a daily basis, there's the whole aspect of trying to help people understand that are not in the industry. What is 1,000 board feet? How does that equate? What does that look like in the number of log trucks or the number of homes? But I'm just, so much of what I deal with, especially these days, it's like, what's carbon sequestration versus carbon storage, and growth rates. And I was on a call just the other day, and there's this big debate on what is non-commercial and commercial logging and thinning. And it's like, well, it's kind of obvious, but they
Commercial,
wanted
they
you
made money.
right,
Non-commercial, they
right,
lost money. No,
right.
no, no.
One in theory should, we'll say it should create some kind of economic return. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll make money, but somebody is. But they wanted to use it as like a surrogate for how big the timber is that's possibly coming off this ground. And we're like, well, it depends on the market. If you've got a really good pulp market, maybe cutting down to an 8-inch DBH is a commercial treatment. If you've got no pulp market, or you don't even have a very good market anywhere, maybe you can't even get rid of 22-inch diameter trees, and so I think that anything that we can do, those of us who are out doing this, trying to just help the general public understand more about what we do, because it is so removed. I mean, you don't really drive past and watch, a harvester every day, or a hot saw, or whatever you want to say, a tethered machine. Unlike in farm country, you can drive by and watch the tractor out there in the field. So it's that terminology piece, I guess, that, is a big deal. And, and I guess I'd put the challenge out to any of the listeners out there of, hey, next time you see something that one of us in social media putting these shows together got wrong, reach out to us. Maybe come on, and that's an opportunity for another show. And yeah, I'm, like I said, I'm a city kid that learned forestry and engineering in school. So I definitely love to learn stuff from the folks who have really been out there doing it.
Yeah, and I come from a Jippo logger, I mean, and we're still Jippo logging, and that for some people, they're like, oh, Jippo logger, Brian, what's a Jippo logger?
Yeah.
Well,
so I will point out to the listeners that you can see Blake's background screen. That is a Cat 518 skidder. That thing is a classic. That thing has history. That thing in the 70s and 80s just won the woods. Like I'll just point that out for the listeners if you can see that if you're watching the video. But I like that background. That's a great looking machine. So,
yeah, great looking little
as
girl
you
there
talk
too.
about Jippo loggers.
Yeah, the little girl, for those that maybe can see, or if you're able to, this is a picture of my now 9-year-old when she was not even 2 yet. And she came to the woods because I kind of a family rule. This is when I was logging full time all the time. Family rule is you never go to the woods by yourself. That's kind of our policy. Maybe you're going to start machines up for service or something like that for an hour before people get there. We're not talking about that. But on this particular day, my dad was in California with my grandparents, and my little brother was still recovering from a knee injury. And we had trucks coming, we had logs to haul, we had stuff to get done. And so I told my wife, both my kids were little at the time, I said, hey, it's summertime. Why don't you guys come up to the woods and you guys can play in the dust and the dirt and go, find bugs. And I'll cut trees and skid some because we had a truck coming and I needed to make a couple loads. And so this was me at lunch break, grabbing my gas jugs and heading in. I was going to skid after that, and Ellie came running to me, waddling to me in her diaper. It was yeah, great times in the woods.
When I was the first time I ever drove a skidder, I grew up on a farm, but we also had some timberland, and my dad actually hauled logs for a timberland owner. Actually, he was a pilot and for TWA, and he made some really good investments, and he purchased various pieces of timberland around where I live here in Idaho. And this guy had a Clark 664 skidder, and he let us use it to log on our property. And my dad, at 14 years old, actually gave me the keys to the Clark, and I thought, man, this is pretty cool. I'd driven tractors, and this thing was just a beast. And then it was a few years later that the same guy he upgraded to a Cat 518. Man, and we did some more logging, and I hopped into that thing, and I thought I had the tiger by the tail. I thought, man, this
Yep.
is the cat's pajamas. I don't ever want to drive that Clark again. So
I was skidding with the 518 today. Not that
Yeah.
one. Dad upgraded.
Yeah.
That one had 27,000 hours. The one that pictured when Dad sold it, and the new one has less, but it's still a Cat 518. We love.
Yeah.
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 Well, I will say I learned to run heavy equipment much later in life, but for a while, at one point in my career, I was a consultant and was out overseeing a large fish pipe installation. And the contractor working on it said, Matt, if you're going to be out here supervising what I do, you got to know how to run the equipment. Go get in that dozer and start pushing dirt for a while. I'm not sure how efficient I was, but I did learn how to run a dozer that day. And since then, I've run one quite a bit. So,
Hey, Matt,
Fun.
I want to. Can we jump into that a little bit? Guys, I think that's something that's missed in our industry a little bit. People come out. We're talking about this message that we're trying to get out to people, and far too often we keep them at an arm's length to our operation, whatever that might be. Matt, that's not normal that you jumped on a dozer and the guy was willing to let you just do it, right? But there's a lot of by doing that, there's a lot of respect that you had for them just because you're like, oh God, this is harder than maybe it's not harder than you thought, right? But you have that
it was.
knowledge. It was. But we don't do it enough. And that includes like forester work. Like how many times have you guys done a stream survey or something like that, or walked up and for a bridge crossing or whatever it might be, and the amount of data you collect and the amount of work that you put into that stream crossing, it's not just, well, I walked out on the road here and I've decided we're going to put a bridge in right there. It's really hard. We don't do a good enough job of bringing people into that knowledge circle.
Go back to Matt, the analogy that you said, most of us, have driven past a farm field, and some people will pull over and watch the tractor, the combine, or somebody baling hay, but we we work in the shadows. I mean, we're 15 miles off the pavement. We're 15, 20 miles off a two-lane road, a two-lane paved highway that might see 30 cars the entire day. And we're 15 miles off that. So we're working in the shadows. And so people they just don't drive up and see us. They just don't have that opportunity. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is like, the other day I was out looking at a future timber sale, on Forest Service property. I drove past this creek called El Dorado Creek, beautiful creek, and it was running really good. Everything's nice and green. And I got my drone out, and I'm trying to fly up this stream without crashing or whatever. And then I watch it later, and it's like as a forester, even though I do some destructive things by cutting down trees and it can be ugly, but I still appreciate and I want a good, clean running stream. I want those things. I enjoy wildlife. I love seeing wildlife. I wish I was more of an avid hunter. My kids are my younger boys are starting to bug me. Can we go hunting? I'm like, oh, sure. All right, I guess, yeah. I guess I'm gonna have to put this hunting hat on again. I haven't shot an animal since I think '07, you know. No, I'm not anti-hunting. I would love to shoot an elk. Elk is just one of the tastiest meats out there, but it's we don't most of the loggers that I know enjoy they love salmon fishing. They love steelhead fishing. They love hunting. So they're not going to go out there and just purposely decimate the entire forest and because they're going to hurt their habitat and they're not going to have those things again. And I will say, I feel like I'm rambling here, but for those of you listening out there, there is absolutely no way with all of the logistics that we have, every logger, every trucker, every forester, every timber faller, there's I had somebody put some numbers together, and we might be able to harvest 500,000 acres a year in the 5 western states. I had, and I won't name his name, but you all know him. And Blake, you had him on one of your podcasts. But I was talking to him. I says, "What is it that we harvest in Washington, Oregon, Northern California, Idaho?" And he gave me the numbers, and then I figured, oh, if it's 20,000 feet to the acre, here's the number. Like there's 193 million acres of federal timber. And the most we could ever fathom to do as an industry here in the 5 western states is probably 500,000 acres. There's no way we can decimate the forest. There's absolutely no way. We couldn't do it even if we tried. And even if we concentrated all our efforts trying to log 500,000 acres on the Forest Service, who's going to log the private side? Who's going to log the Weyerhaeuser and the Hampton Tree Farm, the Sierra Pacific ground, the Port Blakely ground? Who's going to log that? So we can't do it. We just physically we don't have the capacity in the mills to just take on just all that extra lumber or all that extra logs. So
Yeah,
a little bit of a rant there.
you are spot on. I mean, Washington DNR, I think they average between 11 and 13,000 acres a year. And one thing that I like to point out to folks who, are very concerned that we as an industry are overcutting and that kind of stuff. Here in Washington State, we have a little right around 23 million forested acres. And about 11.5 of that, 11.5 million, is what's available and open to some form of management. So not even half. And then on top of it, if you start pulling out all of the regulatory, stream buffers, those type of things, that reduces that acreage even more. And, a lot of the discussions I end up in is, well, where do you want your wood to come from? And do you want it to come from Russia? Do you want it to come from other places? Or do you want your wood to come right here where you can see what's being done? And I'd argue probably some of the most stringent regulations. I'm always baffled when I watch some of the logging down in the U.S. Southeast, like swamp loggers or something, and I'm like, oh, good Lord! If we even thought about doing that, somebody might be in prison,
right?
out
right.
here. So,
the ones that really irritate me, Matt, and I don't know if you guys have been listening to my podcast, but I've been ranting over and over about the importing of lumber, importing of forest products, goods. Brazil, New Zealand, Russia. That drives me insane. Like Canada doesn't drive me insane as much as those other ones do because it's not that far. So if we're talking like ecologically for the planet, it's not a killer to truck something over from Canada. But to bring it across the ocean from Brazil, to bring it across the ocean from Russia, holy cow, that can't be better for the planet. That can't be.
And not to mention, I would imagine that New Zealand has some pretty good environmental things that they have to abide by. But Brazil and Russia, I doubt it. Like you can get on YouTube and just YouTube Russian logging, and there's endless videos of them with an overloaded truck just driving right up a river or right across it. Like if we did that here in the US, they would confiscate my equipment, Not that I have equipment. If I was a logger, they'd confiscate my equipment. They'd lock me up for 30 years, and they'd probably lock my kids up too after I died. So, you know, we there are forest practice rules that we abide by, and if we don't abide by those, and if we step out, if we make mistakes, we can get a warning, we can get a fine. If we repeatedly do it, we start getting black marks, and before you know it, nobody's going to hire us. You know, the state of Idaho or state of Washington or Oregon or California would probably blackball you from operating on their timberland. So we have to do things right. And we've done things so differently than we did 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. It is a different landscape. It's a different type of logging. And we do a much better job with the environment today than we did all those years ago. So
Yeah, I mean, I have seen in my career being required to pull woody debris out of stream courses by the regulating entities.
Yep.
And then not very many years later, being required to put woody debris back in the same stretches of stream by the very same regulating entities. So, it is an evolving and learning environment. And I always like to remind people that, you have to put yourself back in the context of where society and the country was at in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. A booming population that needed housing. And what are you going to do? You're going to build it out of wood. And how are you going to do it? You're going to get that wood as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, fast forward to today, would we do it the same way today? Probably not. Just because different context and different knowledge sets. So, and as you pointed out, Brian, everybody wants to take care of their own house because that's where you make your living. And, not going to say there aren't those rogue contractors out there. I have run across a few in my career. But the general majority, that's, they want to do a good job because they want to go fishing and hunting and doing all those good things. Plus they want to be able to have a career for their kids at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think the more you talk to the loggers and foresters, mill companies, everybody, they are looking to the future. They're looking at not only growing it for a product, but growing it for our future, for those little girls, like it is in my picture of my kids. That means something to people. And when Dad talks about old stories, from the late 60s and 70s, they didn't talk about that. And that's not a knock on that generation or anything. That just wasn't what they were talking about. Today, we massively, I mean, that's a huge part of the conversation, is what it's going to look like for future generations. And that's a good thing.
Most definitely. So, Brian, what's up next for you? Are we gonna, or maybe even, one thing I just realized we didn't do is, maybe some of the listeners, at least for the Stump, probably don't know a whole lot about you. So maybe tell us just a little bit of the background, what you do, and then what is next, and more importantly, what's next, and how can Blake and I help you? I'm gonna toss Blake. I'm gonna commit him out there because I'm gonna commit myself. So
except.
So yeah, my name is Brian Rupp. I mean, you probably figured that out by now. But yeah, I grew up here in the Clearwater Valley. I grew up in a little town called Kamiah and grew up on a farm. And we had some timberland, and so that kind of planted a little seed. And when I went to school at the U of I was, at first I was a general studies major, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But it was about in my second semester, I said, I know I want to be outside. I don't want to be stuck behind a desk. And so I was like, I'm going to go into forestry. And I spent some time in Alaska, spent some time on the west side of Washington, and now I work for a company here in the state of Idaho. I mean, people probably know, but I work for Idaho Forest Group, and I'm a forester, log buyer, log procurement. It's my job to make sure that this mill does not run out of logs. I don't have to do it by myself. There's other foresters that are involved to help make that all go. And it's it's fun. I almost have to pinch myself because I'm an hour literally door to door from my mom and dad's house, from the house that we all grew up in. So it's been really nice to be able to come back here. And in fact, last summer I had two timber sales that were, one was literally right next door to my mom and dad's house. I would go up and I might park my pickup at their house and offload a four-wheeler and drive over and check on the timber sale and come back, have a sandwich with my mom and dad, and then leave, So it was pretty nice. Um, so yeah, what's next for me? I got to keep grinding. Like I'd love to see the outreach get a little more on Instagram, and well, all the platforms, but it's just, it's time consuming, and you can overthink it, but really it only takes about 5 minutes to post a video, whether it's a 7-second video or 50-second video. It doesn't take that long, but I have been thinking about this thing, and I just need to jump off the cliff and do it. It's like I need to come up with a schedule and be like, every single day, just like, if it's 3 videos, if it's a post, a reel, a story, just do it. Keep grinding, trying to, keep those views going up, because when you get the views up, you gain followers. At least that seems to be the challenge, but it's and yeah, I need to just promote it a little bit more. I've thought about, putting some hats out there and see if people want to buy some hats or whatever, but I don't know. I've got some stickers. In fact, I don't think I got one here, but it's basically my podcast symbol. I'm running out. I need to get some more stickers, but I've thought about doing that, just different ways to try to support the channel, but it's, I enjoy what I do, and I'm still passionate about it. And I need to, I'm not off the horse. I'm just kind of like, I need to get fully back on the horse and just continue to dive into it. So I need to recommit myself. How's that? So,
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard, right, man? I mean,
it is.
it's hard. I don't think people understand. Like when I go to schools and I talk to them, and they find out that I'm Manley Jobs, Blake Manley, or if they've never seen anything of it before, and then they watch it and I go back or something like that, they're like, "Oh, hey, you are that guy." Yeah, I am, but you don't understand how much work and time it takes to be on social media appropriately. Like to actually have I listen to Gary V a lot. Probably isn't healthy sometimes.
I listen too, so
Yeah.
Good dude, man. Shout out to Gary V. Good dude.
Yeah.
One of the posts that he put, this has been 6 months or so ago. One of the things he put, he said, if you genuinely reach 100 people on a post, and that post only gets 500 views, but you genuinely reached 100 people, are you not successful? And I like that kind of touched a little bit, that was like, wow, you never know when this is going to be the post, or this is the piece of information that turns somebody's mind around, that makes them like change. Matt, you work for a guy. Well, I mean, I don't mind name dropping because I like the dude. He's a good guy. But Travis Joseph's story is so unique and awesome. And that was I mean, the way Travis tells it, it was one trip up to the fire that completely changed his life. Well, what if he doesn't take that trip that day? Right? And so
yeah,
when I look at it, what if we didn't post? What if Brian didn't post about, blowing a rock pit up, and then somebody sees that, and then they start following what he does, and all of a sudden they become a forester? What if you don't ever post that? How does that change somebody's life that we don't even know about?
exactly. I mean, I think that's the big, I think that's, to me, one of the big challenges of social media, and I think maybe why, like you, Brian, I tend to sometimes overthink it, get worried, I just, too many stories in my own head. But we don't necessarily have always that feedback of, we have the views and but we don't necessarily always get the stories. I mean, right now I'm been going back and forth in comments with a viewer that he's trying to figure out how to find more jobs out there, and maybe even looking into how to bid on Forest Service projects and timber sales. And obviously, for some reason, he's found my podcast, and I've been trying to help, Ed fill that in. It all takes time, so sometimes I'm not super fast in getting back, but but that's just, it takes. You're right. We don't always get that feedback, and I think realizing that we are making a difference out there just by getting this stuff out there, and and I enjoy it. I mean, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. It is fun. So
that's education, though. That's education right there. Like, you just summed it up. You never know. Brian's wife's a teacher in the Grangeville School District, and we can ask her. She doesn't want to be on the podcast. Holy cow!
No, actually, she does, because she and I finish your thought, Blake. Okay. Just finish, and then we'll come back.
I love his wife, by the way. She's such a good person. But we, in education, you don't know who you're impacting. You don't know when that's going to come to fruition. It could be 10 years. It could be 5. Mm-hmm. It could be 30 years. And you, whatever you taught them, we just don't understand. And this is what social media, but the way we use it, the way the three of us use this, it's education. We use it as an educational platform. And you just don't know who you're impacting. Brian, go ahead.
My wife has said it. When we do talk about education, she comes back and she says, okay, so we're getting to the high schoolers or the junior high, and she says, we need to be in earlier. We need to be planting the seed in a third grade class setting, or a fourth grade. Get to them earlier, start planting that seed, and so she's mentioned it. So we need to set something up. You would, Blake, I don't care. You can be on here, Matt, too, but just to bring her on and be like, okay, Camille, enlighten us here.
Show's all yours. Let's go.
Yeah. So,
hey, I read something, and this has been a little while ago, but fourth grade is kind of the key grade. Now, kids mature at different ages, right? But in fourth grade, the seeds planted at that grade level come to fruition more often than other seeds. So I've been told. We'll see.
Well, go ahead, Brian.
No, I think you're right. I mean, that's, kids, they start to become a little bit more aware of the world, and that's where they're going to say, well, I want to be, I want to go work for NASA, or I want to be an engineer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a boilermaker. I don't even know what a boilermaker is, but that's where they're going to start to make those decisions, and will they end up there? I don't know, but you're right. I think there's some truth there, Blake, for sure. So,
yeah, it's interesting, that fourth grade aspect, because Port Blakely Tree Farms does a tremendous fourth grade field trip every year for, I can't remember how many schools, but I mean, they touch a lot of kids every year, of getting them out in the woods, and like you've pointed out, Blake, it's not always easy for these schools to get kids out there, because budgets are tight. It takes money, and that's one of the things, that Port Blakely, they pay for the school bus, and I took both my kids. I attended both their field trips when they were fourth graders. I kind of tried to hide in the back and make sure that nobody knew I was a forester. Unfortunately, the tour guide was the wife of somebody fairly high up in Port Blakely that I have known for years and used to play soccer with. And so she called me out a couple times, and one time was like, "Hey, Matt, guess what? You get to teach the next stop." But but those kids getting out there, seeing that, and a really cool thing that that they do, particularly with this tour, is it's a working tree farm. So especially the teachers, they get to see how that landscape changes over time. And there was a clear cut in part of the field trip tour trail, and it got reforested and all that. So I think you're right. It's the taking the time and energy, and especially exposing kids at an early age to what forestry is.
Yeah.
Fort Blakely, that was my former employee. I actually worked for, it was PLS, Pacific Lumber and Shipping. I was buying export logs over there. So I got nothing but props for Port Blakely. They are a good organization, and they do a very good job of trying to educate those kids. And I'd still love to be working there, but things happened, and they decided to close one end of the business that I was in, and so 26, 7 of us had to look at a door, and here I am in Idaho. So it good things came of that, and no hard feelings whatsoever. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think we've all been through changes, and maybe at the time they stung, but in the end, you look back at it and it's like, wow, that actually happened probably for a reason. And it's easier to look back and figure that out the further you get away from the event. But yeah, no, I mean, and that is unfortunately one aspect of really any business sector is, there are changes and closures and those type of things. But, that's also what makes it, to me, forestry such a fun industry, is for as big as it is, how small it is. Because, I know a guy who's got me involved now in some forestry education work over here on the west side that knows you pretty well, Brian. So first name of John. So
oh yeah, no, very good friend of mine. I owe him a lot. So yeah.
So it's just all those connections to me that I think makes a lot of this such a great place to work.
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
yep. The forestry industry is an awesome industry. It keeps growing smaller and smaller the longer you're in it. I don't go to very many conferences anymore where I don't know a few people.
Yeah. The other thing that I like, just kind of going back a little bit when you're talking about, losing a little bit of steam on, social media and trying to stay on the horse or whatnot. The one thing that like really gets me and like really boosts my spirits and is when you're at a conference or something, and somebody just kind of out of the blue, you might be standing next to them, and they'll just be like, "Well, by the way, I really like your channel. I really like what you're doing." I'm like, okay, thanks. I at that Live in the Woods in April up there was he was a young, gosh, I forget his name, but he was a student. He just graduated from the U of I, and he took a job with Potlatch Deltic. I forget his name, but
Silas Turner.
Yes, Silas. And I, we had been talking for 5 minutes or so, and kids were planting trees, and just out of the blue, Silas goes, "Hey, I really like what you're doing." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." It's so those moments right there, that's when I'm like, okay, all right, that's the negative comment guy, if I ever ran into him somewhere, I don't think I don't think he'd come up and say a word to me, and that's fine. I don't need your negativity in my face.
But Brian, hey, let's talk about your positivity, because Matt may not know, but I know Brian just went on a trip to Europe. And while he's in Europe, Brian, you finish the story. While he's in Europe, Go.
So my sisters started over about a year ago. They kind of planted the seed with my wife. I've got five sisters, four of them older than me, one younger than me. So that may explain about me and who I am and why I tick the way I tick. But they had this idea of going to Europe. One of my sisters was in the military. Her husband did 20 years, and the last 5 years of his career was in Germany. And so she lived there. She got to travel all over Europe and saw some of the finer points of it. I have a sister who lives in Warsaw, Poland. She is a librarian for a school. And so they're like, they really wanted to get their other three sisters over there, and they invited my wife, and my wife's like, well, I really can't go because I just, it's during the school year. I can't do it. She's like, have you guys thought about inviting your brothers? I do have one brother. And my sister's like, well, no, but yeah, brothers, do you want to come? And my wife says, Brian, you really need to go on this trip. And it's like, okay, I'm going. And we flew into Vienna. And before that, on my Instagram page, I got this guy named Andreas, and he's from Germany. And he's always commenting on my stuff. He always is. And we would direct message each other. And when I decided that I was coming over, I messaged him like in February. I said, by the way, I'm coming over to Vienna. I might be in Germany a little bit. I was like, where do you live? And he showed me a map, and I was like, oh boy, I'm going to be driving right through close to his town. Like I'm going to be close. And so I'm like, I want to meet you. Like I just want to come and just shake your hand and see who you are. And we were able to do that. And it was cool. I showed up at his house. He gave me his address, showed up there. He invited me into his home, had his mom and dad there. His dad's like 80 some years old. There's a picture on my social media page. His dad is smoking this pipe. His dad was funny, but it was just cool to just to meet Andreas and to shake his hand and just be with him for 15, 20 minutes, take some photos. And I just like ultimately, if that's what Rupp's Timber Tutorials turns into, where I can just get out and meet people and continue to just showcase forestry for all the good that it is, and be able to meet people from Maine to Florida to Scotland to Germany, like that'd just be awesome. It was so cool to shake that guy's hand. And I keep posting, he keeps, and I just feel like the connection's that much closer because I was able to shake that guy's hand and his dad's hand. And he's just cool, just humble people, just really cool people over there. So the whole trip it was a blast. It was fun, good food, great architecture. Just they built everything out of stone over there in Vienna, and we went to Venice. Went to the castle, the Neuschwanstein Castle. That's a castle that inspired Walt Disney. That's just right there on the German-Austrian border, very southern part of Germany. So it was fun. And now I got to take my wife back. Like I told her, like I have to take you. Like you got to come do this. But yeah, it was fun. It was great. Like yeah.
Matt, do you have any stories like that? Like of somebody that's following what you're doing that you haven't met or that you want to meet or something like that?
Well, I most of the kind of the real feedback and stuff I've gotten, really are folks that I already know. And a couple of them are previous guests who have shared their episodes and have gotten a lot of really interesting feedback, and that one conversation is now expanded out to multiple conversations. But no, like I said, I got this one individual that's looking for information and just kind of reaching out. It Some traveling stuff has given me some ideas and stuff for actually some future interviews. And and there's one kind of connection that we were already connected on LinkedIn, but never met in real life. But he had seen some posts that I had done of a trip. I was very, very fortunate and lucky to get to go to New Zealand, and didn't really have the time for doing any forestry tours. But I bleed sawdust to a certain extent, so I had to go find out where all the log trucks were going, and the chip trucks and all that kind of stuff. But I think he had seen that, and so he sent me a personal note asking if I would be wanted to sign up to come to a conference around bioeconomy in New Zealand, coming up later this year. Unfortunately, it's not going to work with my schedule, but that was really, I think, a personal outreach, because here was somebody who knew that I had some kind of connection to New Zealand, which I will put a shameless plug out there. If anybody gets a chance to go to New Zealand, you got to go. I mean, great food, great people, great forestry. So great place. But yeah, and no, I'm hoping at some point I do. But how about you, Blake? You must, with as many people as you talk to.
Yeah, there's been some moments. I'll tell you what, one of the most humbling recent ones was one of your colleagues, when Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities posted some of my stuff, and which was great. And I reached out to Nick and I said, "Hey, Nick, anytime you want to, do it. And I said, I'm humbled." And he's like, "Blake, we've been following you for a long time." And I'm like, "Oh, that's terrifying. That's terrifying." So yeah, the first time that the now chief of the Forest Service, Tom Schultz, reached out to me to come speak at an event, that was really humbling. It's been a humbling journey for me to be a spokesman to the industry, and to connect the dots between the industry and education. I have a really good friend now that lives in Texas that saw the log truck driving Manley Jobs episode, and he is now working on a model to tether two log trucks together, because we have a log truck driver shortage. For those that don't know, we have a log truck driver shortage. We don't have a problem with trucks. Got plenty of trucks, especially in Idaho, where you can use a diesel engine. No offense, man.
We can still use one here for now.
Jeez.
But he's trying to come up with a way you could tie two log trucks together, so to speak, and be able to come out of the woods. Now, is it perfect? No, I've seen the prototypes, and it's going in the right direction. But the whole reason that he's talking about log trucks is because he saw Manley Jobs, and that's pretty humbling. That's pretty humbling.
Yeah, no, definitely. First off, yeah, Nick, you want to talk about a master of social media in this space, and of course, he has a budget, so that does help. But the number of the reach that he has on Facebook and Instagram is just downright amazing. And and he's a great, fun guy to work with. Your mention about the being able to use diesel trucks made me think of a story. I know a gentleman who owns a whole log chipping and a trucking business up North Olympic Peninsula area, and he was sharing that he asked one of the major truck builders to come demo an electric truck at his facility.
Talk about. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, let's just say that in order to make the drive from the plant in the Seattle area up to the North Olympic Peninsula, they required having a diesel generator mounted on a trailer hooked behind the truck, because it couldn't make it all the way up to the North Olympic Peninsula on one charge, and there were no charging facilities for a Class 8 truck along the way. So yet, and we had a couple folks I talked with that actually were interested in acquiring an electric log truck. And they were told no because the manufacturer had already sold their quota of electric log trucks and they weren't really too excited to sell anymore because, the old tried and true diesel gets the job done. So not to say we won't get there at some point, but it'll be interesting. So when you did that little, slam there about the beautiful state that I live in and being able to use diesel trucks, yeah, electric maybe someday for big heavy trucks, but seems like the technology's not there yet.
No, not there yet.
So, well, hey, we all have families. We've been going at this for a while and it's been fun, but I'm looking and I'm thinking Brian's still at the office and Blake's probably got a 9-year-old running around the house there someplace. And I know I have a 22-year-old and a wife downstairs, probably wondering where I'm at. But I'm going to put a challenge out to the listeners. You guys were a little scared there for a second. I was going to challenge you, but I'm going to put a challenge out to the listeners. If you all as listeners like what you're hearing, want to help the three of us continue to get our message out, the best thing you can do is go to each one of our channels, like a post, comment on a post, share a post, put a like on our channels and a follow, because the engagement is what drives the algorithms and will allow Brian and Blake and myself to get our message, which is really, for a lot of our listeners, their message as well, out to a broader audience. And that is going to be my challenge to all the listeners. You got to go find Brian. We'll put all this in the show notes, so it'll be easy to go find, but you got to go comment, like, and share some of our posts because it'll help get us out there. And if you don't like our posts, then you know what, just don't leave a comment. Just, that's fine. Just listen. But if you really want to help us out, that's the challenge.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Absolutely, Matt. Yeah.
Well, hey, anything else you guys want to add before we wrap it up? And I know this has been fun. I kind of want to look at doing another one of these in, another month or so.
It wouldn't hurt my feelings.
Matt, I think in the next one, we need to find somebody from a different geographic area to join us that's doing this. So let's put our heads together and find that person, because I think that perspective, maybe they've had successes that we can glean from that. So let's put our heads together over the next month and come up with somebody from out of our geographic area. And hey, thanks for this. Appreciate you organizing this, Matt. It's been great.
Absolutely, Matt. I appreciate you putting it together. Hopefully this spurs me on to restart my podcast again and keep going. So,
I'm going to keep, just like my daughter bugs me and my wife bugs me about keeping mine going. I'm going to bug you. You're going to get a text every once in a while. Hey, how's it going? So, we can support each other here, because like I said, I see a lot of parallels in the challenges there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and we will chat again soon.
All right. Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Blake. Been great. We'll do this again.
All right. Thank you.